My name's Pete Wassell. I'm the founder of Augmate. I run Augmate Corporation. I've been in this space for a number of years. From a community level, I run the AR Glasses discussion group on LinkedIn. There's about 4,800 members of that discussion group. I also run ARNI in New York City. ARNI is Augmented Reality New York. It has about 1,800 members in that group. In a former life, I was an IBMer, but 100% of my time is with a startup, Augmate. And I'm really delighted to be here today. I heard from about 90% of the speakers that they essentially hit the wall when it comes to the IT department. And not that I'm happy to hear that, but we've got a solution that addresses that particular concern. So that's why I was happy to hear that, I guess. Why a management platform? So there's a number of reasons why. It's been our experience that the IT department is overlooked. So we ran a number of pilots last year, and they were successful pilots. I'll get into that in a little bit. But essentially, when you get to the IT department, they were very confused about wearables, especially digital eyewear, and really didn't know how to implement things. It's been our estimate that there's about 200 pilots that exist right now. That's a significant number. Some people from credible sources have said it's probably double that number of pilots that are existing. So if you even say a percentage of those will be successful and then go on to a production environment, you need the right kind of tools to be able to implement that and make that happen. And we're a big believer in this technology. We believe this is going to usher in the next industrial revolution. It's got that kind of potential. But it's got to be done right, and you need the right tools to be able to do it. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about why a platform, and I believe this helps support the reason of why you need a platform to do it. So on this first step, we've got a wearable device management system. So if you think about it comparatively, in the past, there's mobile devices, there's laptops that have always needed some sort of system to manage them when you roll them out to the workforce. And these systems allow you to know who's got the device, where those devices are located, the ability to push applications down to those devices, so an organized way to be able to control those devices. We believe the same thing. In the next step, we believe, at least with wearables, is then you need this ability to take the information off the devices. This may come in the form of gyroscope or accelerometer data, positioning kind of information. This data becomes important when you want to know, for example, if your worker is maybe idle or if they're walking. Sometimes this information has the ability to even understand somebody's heartbeat. And I know there's privacy issues, but when you understand this kind of information, you might know when your workers are getting fatigued, when to recommend a break, different kinds of things. So there's a lot of potential here. We'll have to sort through the issues. But that's taking information off the devices. Also on this second step is the connection to the back-end ERP systems, so bringing information down to the devices. So we think this is kind of the next logical tier. And then on the fourth step, or the third step, you've got real-time authoring. So you've got this ability to have a rules-based system, kind of if this, then that kind of system, where you're able to make the user environment more robust, make the usability better for the workers, and with all these steps, you're able to really implement this kind of solution. Okay, so here's how we saw the problem. So just like you have with consumer devices, there's early adopters, right? So with CIO or CTO organization, you're going to have an early adopter who wants to put wearables or digital eyewear on their company's roadmap. So that's really great. And oftentimes, we'd be brought into a company through either their strategy or innovation team, and they do kind of matchmaking, right? So they find a vice president who's got some problem and an emerging technology, let's say with AR glasses that could potentially solve it, and then you run a pilot. So there's various ways you get to that pilot, but that's one of the ways that it works. You might get a lead from one of the digital eyewear companies, or maybe Google Glass, or someone, but there's different ways you get here, but you essentially get to the point of doing a pilot. And we did a number of pilots last year, I'd say about a dozen pilots, with substantial companies, let's just say automotive space, supply chain, medical, these kinds of industries or sectors, remote maintenance applications, pick and pack type applications, these types of things. And I would characterize each one of those pilots as successful. So we'd run our pilot via scientific method. We would have a hypothesis about making that business more efficient, more productive, those types of things. And at the end of 8 to 10 weeks, the sponsor would say, hey, you guys nailed it, you did well. You know, you saved a worker 35 minutes a day, or you reduced errors by 7%, those types of things. So they got it. So they understood the value proposition, the use case. Typically, they knew these things. And that was, we're thinking, hey, that's great news, right? So we would go with the sponsor, we'd walk over to the IT department, and the sponsor would say, hey, we've done the IRR or ROI calculation to say, hey, if we roll this out to 300 people, we're going to save the company, whatever the number is, $10 million. So we're thinking, hey, this is great, really wonderful. And when the sponsor would say, let's roll it out to 300 people, the IT manager would say, no, you're not going to do that. And the typical responses that they would have would be, well, there's a camera on these devices. What if somebody takes a picture inside the facility and tweets it? There's batteries, we don't know how these things get recharged. What if they download an application that we don't really appreciate? What does this do to my network? How do they log on? What does security look like? What if they walk home with one of these devices? So I think you've heard in a number of these talks, these were the kind of issues. So essentially, we hit the wall on a number of pilots last year where just couldn't get into production. So we thought to ourselves, there's a lot of people who are building the individual tools, let's say AR in manufacturing or some niche space, and they're doing it really well. They know that space really well. We should just let them do those pieces, and we'll focus on this particular problem. So we built out a wearable infrastructure system just for the IT department to be able to manage the devices. So that's what we did here, and it's called, we manage our wearable environment manager. So let's talk about where it makes sense to be in the stack. At the bottom level, you've got digital eyewear. You may have smartwatches or even Bluetooth beacons, fitness trackers, that kind of thing. So there's a hardware level. Then there's a level of operating system. So we see a lot of Android. With these devices, it's more of a specialized version of Android than just your straight Android. But then we also see a lot of like embedded OS kind of operating systems. So there's devices that they're very specific. It's kind of one function. It's just for a particular device. And then we think it's important to have a layer here, and this is kind of a platform layer where it handles security. So the ability to do secure sockets, so whitelist and blacklist MAC addresses, encryption, those types of things, so that companies feel comfortable passing that data back and forth to the device. But then do a number of features that the IT department would expect. So the device management, knowing where the device is located, the ability to do real-time APIs to back-end systems, device interconnectivity, and I'll talk about that in a second, messaging and notifications, so above the application layer to be able to message a person, a team, or the whole enterprise. And also the ability to do OTA, or over-the-air updates. So sending out applications when there's a new version of the application, be able to send that out to the right people. So for example, we ended up connecting with Active Directory so that you'd be able to do that by individual, team, or the whole enterprise. So you just select the devices and push out the applications. And it gets really interesting when you've got that kind of feature because you could do, for example, A/B testing. You might want to send one process to one team and a different process to another team just to experiment to see which one's more efficient. So there's kind of some cool things you could do there. And then obviously then it goes on to your application developers, your Big Four consulting companies, innovation labs, the IT departments, dev shops to go out to the market. So that's kind of how we see the stack. So why in a wearable environment? So we believe that position is also important. So there's kind of this intersection of people, process, and position. And we believe there's an inflection point where when those things come together, it's an event, and you can do certain things. So last year, we did a number of projects with Bluetooth beacons. So we'd use Estimotes and Connectio devices or gimbal devices, essentially to create work zones. So we would upload a floor map to our platform. We'd place the beacons on that floor map and distribute them through a facility, not for super accuracy, but just to create work zones. Because essentially, you're using these Bluetooth beacons for situational awareness or contextual awareness. So in other words, you walk into a room, you might want to turn off the camera. So for example, the IT directors have said to us they want full control over these devices. So they want the ability to turn on and turn off the camera, to turn on and turn off the micro USB port. And when we provision our software onto those devices, that's what we do. We get down to that machine layer to satisfy those things for the IT department. But you can also use events to trigger those things as well. And I'll get to that in a little bit of some of the things you can do, kind of if this, then that when it comes to positioning. Okay, so someone might say, well, this looks a little bit like an MDM kind of structure, but it's actually pretty different. We've found that MDM doesn't quite work in this particular space. So for example, if you look at wearables, 6 of those devices, they don't use Wi-Fi. They only use Bluetooth. And what about the interconnectivity with these devices? Like, how does that work? What operating system? So 6 of these devices also have their own unique version of an embedded operating system. Likewise, even on the Android side, it's a unique version of Android. So we believe it's important to have almost a personal IoT mesh. So there's going to be multiple devices that people have. There's going to be smart belts, there's going to be smart socks, and as corporations start adopting this technology, you want to be able to use it all, filter it through one device, and send it back to the network. So that's why we think an environment, wearable environment, is important. So I'm just going to use a couple examples here of, again, solving the problems of the IT departments and why that's important to move things forward. So in this particular example, with the use of beacons, when somebody goes outside the geofence, what we've done is on glass and then also on the smartwatches, you bring up a screen that gives that worker a certain amount of time, configurable, to say, get back into the working environment. Otherwise, we're going to lock this device. And that becomes important because you don't want these devices to have legs and go home. So having that ability is important. It essentially makes that device a hunk of metal and not really worth taking anywhere because there's nothing you could do with it at that point. The use of applications to kind of whitelist and blacklist applications based on roles, based on authority, the profile of that person in the system. So making it super easy, almost an application library. So we believe that companies are going to have multiple devices. So any one particular company, and my days at IBM, we're a 400,000 person company, but any big company, you're going to have multiple departments, multiple divisions. Realistically, a company is going to have 3 or 4 different kinds of digital eyewear based on the needs of those areas. You're going to have 12 or 15 different applications. So having the ability to be really agnostic and work across multiple devices, we think is very important for making this technology work and adopted. And again, also messaging and notifications. So we found just simple problems like a manager would go out onto a factory floor and they'd spend 15 minutes just looking for someone. So just the ability to say, hey, where are you? Or meet me in this particular area where there's a problem solves a big problem. So it comes down to efficiency, productivity, communication is a problem, and just solving that is pretty useful. So in conclusion, I guess I'll just say that by solving these departments, these problems of the IT department is a way to accelerate the adoption of this kind of technology in the enterprise. That's it. Thank you.